Hello, welcome to the conversation here on News Central Television. This is the program where we bring you up to date with all the latest happenings across the continent in the world of politics.
I am Rita Omodia. It's so good to have you for another week of the conversation right here on News Central TV. Now, on today's edition of the conversation, we will be discussing the emergence of Atiku Abubakar, that's Nigeria's former vice president, as the presidential candidate of the main opposition People's Democratic Party, PDP, in the next year's general elections. Also, we'll be looking at rising tensions between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda, as each country accuses the other of backing armed rebel groups. Those are serious allegations coming from both Rwanda and DRC, Benga, I must say.
Quite an eventful weekend. And serious allegations, because Rwanda, the national flag carrier of Rwanda, suspended flights to, cancelled flights to Lubumbashi, Goma, and Kinshasa, and also the one everyone is talking about, the PDP's presidential primaries in Abuja, where former Nigerian Vice President Atiku Abubakar emerged victorious as the flag bearer for the opposition.
I mean, it was quite a show on Saturday. I had to follow it up at a point, and what actually tricked me was when the Tambuwal candidate actually withdrew from the candidacy, and then you could see Dina Milaya coming and carrying what it was quite a show on Saturday. That. I mean, politics in Nigeria is always a very serious and actually a funny situation in Nigeria.
Okay, now talking about the man of the moment at the camp of the opposition People's Democratic Party in Nigeria is Atiku Abubakar, the former vice president of Nigeria, clinched at the presidential ticket of the People's Democratic Party for the 2023 general elections after polling 371 votes at the primaries, which was held at the MK Abiola Stadium in Abuja. Governor of Rivers State, Nyesom Wike, trailed with 237 votes, while Bukola Saraki, a former Senate president, garnered 70 votes.
Now, Governors Udom Emmanuel of Akwa Ibom and Bala Mohammed of Bauchi posted 38 and 20 votes respectively, while Ayim Pius Ayim, former secretary to the government of the Federation, garnered 14 votes. Diana Oliva and Samuel Habunwa secured 1 vote each, while 12 votes were voided in the exercise. Now, commenting on his victory, Atiku promised to work for the development of the country if elected president. Recall that Atiku was the candidate of the PDP in the 2019 elections, won by President Muhammadu Buhari. Now, joining us for this conversation, we have Olufemi Lawson, is the Executive Director, Center for Public Accountability from Lagos, Nigeria. We also have Abdul Aminu Mahmud, human rights lawyer and political activist, all the way from Abuja, Nigeria. Gentlemen, welcome to the conversation.
Yes, thank you for having me. Good evening, Nigerians.
Good evening.
Africans.
All right, so I'll start with you, Aminu. Let's look at the primaries. I mean, how would you describe the conduct of the primaries? Some have alluded to it as the freest convention ever witnessed, while there are also speculations, and that is one coming from a former aspirant, that's Hayatuddin, that the contest was obscenely monetized. What was your assessment so far?
Two things here. We had a political party that went into or collapsed into crisis after it lost a decisive election in 2015. And just 7 years later, for the opposition party to bounce back, organize itself to the extent that it held a successful presidential convention in which its candidate was elected, is something Nigerians should applaud. Critics have slayed the party and the candidates rightly, in my opinion, for what many consider as the monetization of the presidential, selection, nomination, and election process within the party. But I'm also very sympathetic with the party. Increasingly in our country, the political process has become extremely expensive. If you do not command huge war chest or resources, the likelihood exists that you will not command some level of following, within your party, and that was what we saw. 1 month preceding the presidential convention, and also on the day of the convention itself. It's not a curiously strange development. It's been part and parcel of us. It has become part of our political culture, and we've seen this insipid practice, where crept into the general elections of our country. We've seen people sharing loaves of bread, cups of rice, beans, oil across the length and breadth of our country during general elections. It points to the fact that where poverty has sunk deeply into the homes of our country, people find the political process as outlets, for them to eke out some level of living. It's not a good practice. I don't know how political parties can stamp this practice out. But I think when we begin to drive good governance within the larger governance and political environment, less emphasis will be placed on money, on money politics.
Thank you, Abdul. Abdul Mahmud. I'd like to bring in Olufemi here. Human Rights Writers Association of Nigeria, HURIWA, has told the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, to go after all the special delegates of the People's Democratic Party. Is this workable, and what do you make of the presence of EFCC officials at the venue of the primaries over the weekend?
Thank you. Good evening once again. As much as it is important that we continue to, show concern, look at, the processes leading to the election of candidates, we must make sure that this is done in an holistic manner, so that if truly EFCC has mention of the PDP on Saturday, it must do so to the extent that it covers every strata of political party activities around the primaries. I witnessed, a lot of circumstances across states, federal constituencies and senatorial districts where primary elections were held. I realized that the culture of the monetization of this process, the culture of vote deepens to the extent that even aspirants into the House of Assembly positions, aspirants into the House of Representative positions and Senate and the likes, pay heavily to get delegate support to become candidates of their various political parties. So I think it's important that we look beyond Saturday, and the reality is that politicians are so smart, and they would not have been foolish enough to bring the bags of dollars or naira convention. These delegates, you must understand, have arrived at Abuja day prior to the convention. Some of them have been there for days. There have been meetings with stakeholders and leaders. They visited these delegates in their hotels, and a lot of things would have exchanged hands. So nobody would naturally be foolish enough to bring such cash.
All right, Olufemi, please hold on that, your thoughts. While we're still looking at the whole money buying going on at the primaries, let's go over to another situation here now, Abdul. Let's look at the man of the moment, Atiku. Now, he has won back-to-back primaries on the platform of the People's Democratic Party. What chances does he have now? And does he have the much-needed popularity? I mean, I look at the man, Atiku, and I'm like, you're going in again for another election. What does it take for him to actually claim this victory?
My sense of his candidacy is this. If my understanding of history is correct, 2023 will be the third time he will be on the ballot. The first time was in 2007, and he came third in that year's presidential elections. In 2019, he came second in a very controversial election, which many believed that that he won. The PDP is not what it was in 2019, and whether we admit it or not, a lot of disaffection will proceed from what happened on Saturday here in Abuja, with the display of what people have described as betrayal. But for me, I do not describe it as betrayal as such. I see it as alienation of interest. Those whose interest could not cohere with that of Governor Wike decided to back Atiku. Does Atiku have a chance to unseat the ruling party? Well, for me, a shouting chance. But can his party beat the APC in general elections? It depends if Nigerians will begin to adjudge the APC on the basis of its records. Our economy is in a parlous state. Our country is racked by all sorts of criminality, banditry, terrorism. As we speak, today is 67th day that some compatriot of ours were snatched from a train between Abuja and Kaduna. And 67 days, we're talking about two and a half months. Nothing has been heard from them beyond the videos the terrorist group post on the social media space and all that. If Nigerians do not judge the government on the basis of its record, don't forget, we are dealing with a totalizing ruling party who has control of 22 states in our country already. How the opposition party will seat a ruling party that has control of 22 states, is yet to be seen. But a lot of people are disaffected in the party. A lot of people feel that Atiku does not have that fighting power, to unseat a ruling party. And they may be right. We saw it in 2019 when the results were declared. He virtually jumped ship, abandoned the country, and went to Dubai to stay, and left his supporters to their own whims and caprices. If you want to unseat a ruling party like APC did to PDP in 2015, you have to come out with rules outside the rule book. You have to adopt, fighting framework. But I do not think that Atiku has it. I'm not a prophet, though people call me a great oracle. If I want to call 2023 elections, I'll call it for APC, no matter who APC will be bringing out next week.
Okay, thank you, Abdul. I'd like to bring in Olufemi here. Still talking about the chances of the former Vice President Atiku Abubakar. In his victory speech, after he referred to himself as the unifier and alluded to the fact that the Buhari administration under the All Progressive Congress has managed to divide the country. Do you believe so? And looking at, I do know that the PDP jettisoned the zoning formula, but having gone through, it will be 8 years of Northern presidency. Can he really play the part of a unifier if he hasn't stepped down for another candidate from a different region to contest?
A lot of factors are going to be coming into play as far as what determines who becomes the next president of Nigeria in 2022 will be concerned. But the biggest of those factors will be the will of the Nigerian people to elect a president of their choice. That's going to be the biggest factor. Other factors such as zoning, and experience and some other things are inevitable. Just like you mentioned, the question of the next president of Nigeria coming from the same region where President Buhari, who is going to be serving his 8-year term by the end of May 2023, comes from would also be an issue. And just like Mr. Mahmud said, the most critical, part of this is that Atiku cannot be said to possess what some other aspirants, even within other political parties today, do not possess. And that is why we cannot see his emergence, even having contested 3 times, as something that is enough to say that he's closer to becoming the president of Nigeria than he has ever been. But most importantly, Nigerians are going to be the determining factor if votes are allowed to count. But other factors, including zoning, which is a major issue, which APC as a party may end up considering, will be one of those factors that will actually determine who wins the next election, because it cannot be wished away. The truth is that we cannot wish.
But sorry to interrupt you. What about the scorecard of the ruling All Progressive Congress? Not a lot of Nigerians are satisfied with their performance so far. So wouldn't that play into the hands of the opposition?
It's not about the fact that we are satisfied by the virtue of the performance of the APC. A lot of people are only disappointed because they had trust that APC was coming to do something differently from the PDP. But as far as some of us are concerned, there's nothing the APC has really done that is different from what its twin sister, the PDP, have always done when they were in power. And if we are calling for a genuine change from the present order, it cannot be a change from APC to PDP any longer, or PDP to APC. It must be a change that will make us do away with both PDP and APC. So if you're talking about the scorecard of the incumbent administration, be it corruption, insecurity, even though it has become more prevalent in some cases under the APC. But the truth is that the party has not, in any way been different from, the PDP. Look at it, for instance, for a party that is in the main opposition that has close to, 15 governors over the last 8 years, what has it been able to do to stand as an alternative, to play the role of opposition to the APC? It tells you that they are more or less like the same thing. They believe so much in the way the APC have governed this country. And I don't think it becomes an alternative for Nigerians who are really tired of the APC. So the APC cannot be ruled out of this game as it stands, because the PDP has not in any way done anything differently, but to position itself as coming to do something differently from what the APC has done in the last 8 years.
All right, thank you so much, Olufemi. The PDP hasn't done anything, the APC hasn't done anything, so what's the fate? Anyway, let's go back to the moment of the primaries when the governor of Sokoto State, that's Aminu Waziri Tambuwal, talked about sacrifice and stepped down from the primaries. Now, there was a wild cheer when he told his supporters to vote for Atiku Abubakar. Abdul, did it come as a surprise to you, and what do you make of that public display of solidarity for Atiku?
No, it actually didn't come to me as a surprise. For Nigerians who follow me on Twitter, I tweeted at about 5:45 on the 11th of May of May this year. That's about 19 days ago. And in the past few months, I've followed where the delegates are across the country. The data and statistics are there, and I followed who owns these delegates across our country, because in different states of our country you have centers of power, and these centers of power also control delegates. And we've had instances where Atiku, for example, has his allies, controlling certain states in the country. So on the basis of approximation, I was able to approximate votes, to the two leading candidates. And I did tell Nigerians that the way things were going, Mr. Peter Obi would struggle to even have a single vote, in the presidential primaries, based on the figures I was dealing with. And that same day, I did say that on the basis of the figures I have, Wike would win the presidential primaries because he's been able to bulldoze his way through centers of power across our country, and he has been able to use his huge war chest, not on the day of the primaries, not during the 1 month of campaigns, virtually 4 years of keeping some PDP branches, like in Cross River State, in Edo State, to some extent in Imo State afloat and all that. So people had dues to pay, dues to pay to him. But because the delegates' votes were scattered, I did say that the two pathways, spectacular pathways for Wike and Atiku to victory will be Tambuwal and Saraki. Whoever commands the support of either Saraki or Tambuwal will have unassailable victory on the day of the primaries. And that's what happened. The Wike team knew that if Tambuwal switches to the other side, they will lose. But what did they do? I'm not sure riches were made. Riches were made to Tambuwal. They kept Tambuwal on their side on the basis of trust on loyalty. On loyalty. Loyalty doesn't work in politics. We're talking of a country that is strife, that is torn by primordial and atavistic interests. And that's what we saw. That's what we saw on Saturday. Okay. Atavistic interests, primordial interests trounced personal friendship, between Wike and the interests of the Fulani hegemony. Tambuwal chose Northern Nigeria. That's what happened. Okay. It would have switched either way.
Thank you, Abdul Mahmud. Now, let me bring in Olufemi just before we begin to wrap things up. Now, the opposition PDP has held their convention and the APC has been stalling on this. So almost like a game of a poker game. They've played their hands. We now know who the candidates are, who the presidential flag bearer is. Now, how can the APC use this to their advantage? Do you see them conducting open primaries or result into having a consensus candidate? How can they make this work in their favor? Now that we know who the candidate is for the opposition People's Democratic Party.
But for the APC, it has clearly shown that even at the 11th hour to the moment of choosing a candidate for the election, it is not yet as organized, as prepared as the PDP, because every step laid down by the PDP, towards its presidential primary were fulfilled, without any alteration. Even the last-minute attempt to shift, the presidential primary, because of the extension given by INEC, was resisted because of the determination of the party. Unfortunately, the APC, as a governing party, has been unable to demonstrate, this capacity of being a party that is in government, that has control over its members and the processes leading to its plan. One should be worried about what may likely be the eventual outcome of the APC primaries, especially when you realize all the suspense here and there, ups and downs, that have characterized the mere process that should have led to the selection of a presidential candidate. As we speak, for a party that is, of course, supposed to have submitted names of candidates in the next few days, if not for this extension, not to have even screened aspirants, not to have let Nigerians know which qualified to go to the primaries or not, tells a lot about the level of seriousness that the party has attached to the process. And that is why it has continued to fuel the speculation that the party may not really be ready for any serious, elective, Congress to select its presidential candidate. It may end up in something that may look like a consensus has been speculated by Nigerians, because nothing really indicates the preparedness. As we speak, no convention planning committee, has been announced. Nothing concrete shows that in the next 6 days, this party is going, for a convention to elect its presidential primary. And I think Nigerians should really focus on this and look at the likelihood of, the manner in which the candidate of the party will emerge.
Thank you very much. I would like to say a very big thank you to you, gentlemen, Olufemi and Abdul Mahmud, for being a part of this conversation. We look forward to having you back soon, hopefully after the convention of the ruling All Progressive Congress. Thank you for your insight and your time.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
You're watching The Conversation here on News Central Television. We'll go on a quick break, and when we come back, we will be looking at the breakdown in diplomatic relationships between the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is accusing Rwanda of supporting M23 rebels, and we'll look at the implication of that to security in the Great Lakes region. Do stay with us. We'll be right back.